Chapter 237, back with another review. And this is actually going to be the first in a series that I'll be doing. Uh, I was thinking that it's actually been a while since I've done a big franchise where I went through all the films. I think most recently would have been the three Hatchet films. I still haven't done the fourth one called Victor Crowley, but I'm not sure what the last actual franchise that was maybe more than three films. Uh, but I have done Friday the 13th, I have done Halloween, and amongst the ones I still need to do, I thought, well, one that would be probably the most interesting to go through again, because it's been a while, would be Child's Play. Now, I've already reviewed the first film, and I thought I had reviewed the second film, but turns out I hadn't. So, unfortunately, the first one that I'm going to be starting with is Child's Play 3 from 1991. Reason being is because for the longest time, all I had was the first film and this, which is just 2 discs. And I think back in 2011, 2012, I lost the disc that had 2 and 3. So I went out and I bought 2, but I never picked up 3. I just picked this up the other day. And so it had been a while since I've seen 3, and I just wanted to watch it again. So haven't reviewed 2 yet, kind of skipping it to do 3, but I will do 2. And I did go ahead and also get Curse and Cult of Chucky, which I'll talk about those. And this still has Bride and Seed, Where It Can Stay, because I'm not the biggest fan of those films. And before anyone asks, no, I have not seen the show Chucky, nor do I care to. I didn't have any interest. I have reviewed the remake, though, and I do like the remake. I do think it is one of the better remakes since 2003, at least. I actually really do like it. So I've reviewed 1 in the remake, starting the franchise with 3, because it's been probably the longest since I've seen that one, and then I'll go back to 2. So Child's Play 3, plus I really like the covers of 2 and 3. The very 90s. Like I remember being a young kid, like 3 or 4, and seeing these VHS tapes on the horror shelves. And I still think these are classic VHS covers. This is still one of my favorite covers. So, and I know these have good Blu-ray releases. I think they even have these covers as well, but I don't know. I just like them as is. So Child's Play 3 came out in 1991, just a few months, I think, after Child's Play 2. 2 wasn't as big a hit as the original, but big enough to warrant a snappy sequel. It was directed by Jack Bender, of course written by Don Mancini, who wrote all of them, created the whole concept of Chucky. Stars Justin Whalen, this time as Andy Barclay, because they pushed him to 16 years old, so Alex Vincent could come back. But also Perry Reeves, Jeremy Silvers, Brad Dourif, of course, returns as Chucky. You do get a fun appearance by Andrew Robinson, who was the, I can't remember his name, Kirsty's dad in Hellraiser. He has as like a psychotic, a laughably psychotic, a military barber. And Travis Fine, who's been in a few things. I know he was an orderly in Girl Interrupted. He's like a Niedermeyer asshole in this. I thought there was a joke in this where someone called him a Niedermeyer, but I guess not. Originally, Mancini wanted to have the idea with multiple Chuckies in this, but because of the budget, didn't work, but he would save that for Cult of Chucky. He wanted to have John Ritter as a security guard. That didn't work out, so he moved it to Bride of Chucky. And originally, before Jack Bender was hired as director, they wanted Peter Jackson, which would have been awesome. This was a year before Dead Alive, so this was still Peter Jackson's low budget, gory as hell splatter phase. That could have been really, really cool. I would love to see what Peter Jackson could have done with the Chucky movie. Child's Play movie, I'm sorry. Because I've always been in the opinion there's a difference between Child's Play and Chucky. Like, Child's Play I've always liked. Chucky films, not so much. And, of course, this film was very notorious over in the UK because there were two murders around the time, both in 93. There was a 16-year-old Suzanne Capper, but just prior to that, there was the murder of 2-year-old James Bulger. Not Whitey James Bulger, but a 2-year-old. And I think that's the case most people think of when they think of the controversy behind this film. I'm more familiar with the case of James Bulger, the 2-year-old who was lured away by two 10-year-olds, Robert Thompson and John Venables. Reason being was because they found blue paint at the crime scene. They lured him away from his mother, tortured, killed him, left his body at the train tracks, and they were found. But they found blue paint, and there's blue paint in this, albeit in the form of paintball. Not really a violent scene or a death scene. But it's a classic case of them looking for a scapegoat because, I mean, without getting too much into it, I read both families had rented this, and I read John Venables' father had rented this, but Venables wasn't living with his father at the time, and he wouldn't have seen it. Plus, Venables wasn't a fan of horror movies, but just a side note about this film, how it was wrapped up in some controversy, and it was put on one of the DPP lists, not Video Nasties, but a list of like 5 or 6 films that's linked to controversy, kind of like Clockwork Orange. But anyway, about the actual film. I think this is kind of the black sheep of the whole franchise. I think it's because it's not seen as a big classic like the first two. It doesn't have the huge negative reception that Bride and Seed had, especially Seed. So I think this is one of the more forgotten ones or less talked about ones. I've always liked Child's Play 3. In fact, this was the first film with Chucky that I ever saw. I remember my brother and I used to go to our grandparents' house, get on and off the school bus, and my grandmother was flipping through the channels, landed on USA, and it was the scene where the the sergeant or whoever is slow motion carrying Chucky to the garbage truck, and Andy sees him for the first time. It was that scene, and that was the first time I ever saw Child's Play. Of course, I knew about Chucky, I just had never seen anything. I think with this one, they were really starting to go down the comedy route. It's not as much a comedy as, say, Seed of Chucky, or even so much as a dark comedy like Bride of Chucky. But he kind of has more one-liners like Freddy. More times he's on screen, he has more one-liners or saying or doing something kind of silly. Like these girls find him, they put lipstick on him. It's like this means war. Because, in the first film, there was a lot of POV shots and kind of showing just his feet or his hands, kind of keeping him secret up until the last part of the film. Then 2, they go all out. He's always on camera, but they still try to make him look scary and intimidating for being 2.5 feet tall. Like when he kills the teacher, but it's like a low of upward angle to kind of make him look more imposing. Here, they're definitely going the more comedy route, which is fine. I still think it's well done. I would say it's not the worst look for Chucky. I've never been a fan of the Frankenstein monster stitched together look. But he does look better in this than he does Curse and Cult. Which, yes, he does still have the stitches, but that's a whole other thing. He doesn't look as good as he does in the first two. but the puppeteering is still decent. In fact, two of the puppeteers returned. Ed Brock Winkless IV and Vance Snowden. They both returned as puppeteers. I think there was more computer animation with or computer puppeteering. I really like the opening credits, similar to Child's Play 2, where it's reassembling Chucky. But here it's like the cobweb, dilapidated good guy factory. You just see some of his blood drip into the plastic mix, and you just kind of see all the blood and liquid plastic going together. And then it looks like, shot in reverse, or played in reverse, obviously, but you can tell they melted the doll, and they played in reverse, so it looked like it was coming back together with him screaming. I do have a couple NECA figures of Chucky. The only one I have from Child's Play would be the one from 3, where he's got the messed up face. Which I know this scene, he doesn't have the razor, but I thought that was a fun scene. And I think the person I bought it from had one from 2, because it came with this good guy's yardstick. That's just adorable. Well, I said 8 years after the events of 2, Andy Barclay, now played by Justin Whalen, who I thought did fine. In and out of foster homes, now has nowhere to go but a military school, so he goes to Kent Military School. He's treated like the outcast, new boy. And there's a few there, like Travis, who was it? Where the hell is Shelton? Oh, Travis Fiennes, who plays Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Shelton. Again, he's like the Niedermeyer asshole. He gives Barclay a hard time. There's Dean Jacobson as Whitehurst, who's kind of a nebbish. He's got big glasses. He gets picked on more than Andy does. He's told by several people that he's like the most pathetic excuse for a man, but he does like the bravest thing out of this whole movie. Probably out of any of the movies. And then Andrew Robinson from Hellraiser, he plays the military barber who's psychotically obsessed with cutting hair. There's even a scene where he's walking through breakfast, he's touching everyone's hair. He's like, Tuesday, Wednesday. And when he's cutting hair, he's always like, oh yeah. He's getting into it. He's definitely hamming it up for fun, and it works. He is entertaining. The only thing, I guess, would be this young kid, Tyler. Maybe it's the character, but even the kid actor wasn't that great, who's played by Jeremy Silvers. He's this young kid who finds out Andy gets a good guy doll. He opens them. Chucky realizes new body. He hasn't told anyone yet, so Tyler's like his new target. But he still wants to go after Andy just for, fucking him up for 2 films. So he goes after Andy, but Tyler's the one he wants to transfer his soul to. And there are a couple good jokes. Chucky says, Chucky's gonna be a bro. Or he sees Andy has a Playpen magazine. He's like, oh, Andy, how you've grown. After his first victim, who's like the head of the toy company, which I think he's the guy from the second film that tells the guy to shove the doll up his ass. He strangles him with a yo-yo, and he's like, nothing like a strangulation to get the circulation pumping. And basically, it's kind of what you expect. Andy sees that Chucky's come back. No one believes him. He's always made to look like he's a troublemaker. Tyler doesn't believe him. And then probably one of the craziest things Chucky's ever done is he takes all the rifles used for this war games, where it's red team, blue team for paintball. and he replaces all the red team's paint ammunition with live rounds. So when they actually go to do paintball, they're using live rounds. I mean, Brad Dourif's voice is still great. His laugh is still iconic. I would say the ending set piece isn't as memorable as Child's Play 2, which will be like this huge horror ride called Devil's Lair. It's not as memorable as the Toy Factory and Child's Play 2. They're also not quite there long enough. But, yeah. I would say some of the looks of Chucky, like, it looks like he always has, like, big eyes. He's always just kind of, I don't know. Maybe he's not as iconic as this look. I don't know how well you can see it. Probably not well, but yeah, even though doesn't look as good, it's still one of the better films. Not quite as bloody or gruesome as some of the first two. He kills the barber guy with the straight razor, who always says, "Presto, you're bald." But he's like, "Presto, you're dead." I do like the scene where the head sergeant, or whatever his rank is, sees Chucky and he just has a heart attack. Because it's kind of like, what would a slasher villain do if someone just had a condition or whatever? They died of a heart attack right in front of him. Of course, he's just like, "Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me." I do love the look of Chucky when he's pissed and scared. Like when that guy throws him in the garbage truck and the guy just goes to dump it in the back and Chucky's like, he's screaming because he's pissed and he's scared. It's one of the funniest looks. Then the garbage truck guy helps him, but he still, crushes him in it. And I always love the reaction of people when they see that Chucky's actually alive. Lieutenant Colonel Shelton in this one, or Phil in part 2. It doesn't have, I don't think this has as big a body count either. But, yeah, eventually pretty much the whole school, or at least the 2 teams, are after Chucky. And Whitehurst does the bravest thing where Chucky throws a grenade, which is right next to everyone, and Whitehurst just jumps on it, covers it. There's a carnival nearby, and we get the showdown in the Devil's Lair ride. Which, there's a cool part where this giant Grim Reaper with the scythe comes down, and that's where you get sort of that effect where his face is all sliced off. Ends with him falling into a fan and getting all chewed up. Apparently this takes place a month before Bride of Chucky. So that's why he's still all in pieces and everything. The score is definitely different. It doesn't have that kind of child music box kind of sound. It's definitely a lot heavier. There's like heavier drum beats. Like this dun-dun. More heavier kind of rock riffs, especially during the opening credits, and more so a lot of the scenes towards the end. The rest is kind of like military snare drums. Acting wise, I thought everyone kind of did a good, I think everyone did do a good job, save for the kid that played Tyler. Brad Dourif is still awesome. The guy that plays Shelton, he's definitely a guy that just, he's doing his job as like a drill instructor, but you could tell he likes it a little too much. I would say Chucky looks different because it had a different maker of the doll, but it was still David Kirshner, who also, he executively produced this one, but produced the first 2 films. But, yeah, I'm not sure what to say about it. It's definitely a decent sequel. I think it's the last truly good sequel. Up until the remake. Or the last good film up until the remake. And again, The ones I really like are the ones that are titled Child's Play. The ones I don't really care for, or the ones that I hate, are the ones that are called Chucky. Which is kind of sad. But, yeah, they're definitely going for more comedy feel with this one. Chucky has more one-liners. He's usually saying or doing something funnier every time he's on screen. It's not quite trying to make him look scary or trying to set up scares. I think one of my favorite scenes is when he's replacing all the paintball ammunition with the live rounds. He's just got this evil look on his face, like he can't wait for it. I do like the set piece of the Devil's Lair ride at the end. Again, just not as memorable as part 2. There are some kind of laughable moments, like as punishment for, because Shelton takes Chucky away from Andy, and Andy tries to get it back, but it looks like it's been stolen. So to punish everybody, they're all doing drills and laps late at night. And Andy asks Whitehurst while they're doing laps, he's like, where did the kids sleep? Because he knows he's after Tyler. He's like, oh, they sleep down in that wing. And he just takes off. Like, doesn't fill them in or anything, which just kind of makes it look weird. It does feel kind of rushed, but it's not that terribly written or badly written or acted or shot or anything. As far as the sequel goes, that's pure, like, because Child's Play 2 came out, and this got greenlit, written, made, like, it had a release date 9 months after it was greenlit, so they had, like, no time to make this. And it still came out being a decent sequel. It does have kind of a finale feel to it with this one. Not as good as Child's Play 2, not just the set piece, but I do feel like Child's Play 2 had more of a good finish to the story. But even with this one, I think it's like a good finale as well. I wouldn't say it doesn't quite pack as much as an ending punch as the second one does. But if they had just ended it here, it would have been a decent trilogy. I like to think of it as a trilogy. But unfortunately, there's not too much to say about it. Maybe that's why it's one of the forgotten ones or less talked about ones. I would say it's a bit underrated. You know, people talk about how much they love 1 and 2, deservedly so. How they don't like Bride, or how much they hate Seed, deservedly so. And then there's the 2 newer ones, and then the remake. But I've always liked Child's Play 3. Again, it is a step down from the first 2. And I know in the world of the internet, if it's not as good or better, it's garbage, trash, dumpster fire. You know, there is no second or third best. I've always liked Child's Play 3. But, yeah, not too much to say about it, unfortunately. But, so that's my review for that. I will get to 2 at some point, but it had been a while since I've seen 3, and I wanted to go back to it. So, yeah, that's the first review in this continuous series, because I've already done 1 in the remake. So, stay tuned for the rest of the Chucky films, and thank you for watching.